Hi everyone, if you're playing Hand Simulator, you've probably thrown your mouse at the screen several times and dropped many F-bombs. So the question in your mind is, how do you load the damn gun? And that's the point of this video. Now there are several videos on YouTube covering how to load the Revolver. There are actually several guns. There's a Revolver, there's the AK-47, whoa, and there is the Colt M1911. So each one will unlock in sequence in single player. So you must first load the Revolver, shoot the target, and then you get the AK-47. You shoot the AK-47 and you unlock the Colt, and that's the idea. You can get some of these weapons in the multiplayer modes like The Last Hero and Mexican Standoff, and that's where you probably encounter the most frustration in trying to load these weapons under pressure. So this video will walk you through how to load the gun, as well as talk through some more advanced ways of loading the weapons. Firstly, I'll walk you through the easy method, which is the easiest to learn for beginners, and also the method shown by the developer in the walkthrough tutorial on YouTube. There's no narration or instruction, so I'll try my best to explain how it's done. So you start off with the weapon. This is the default Revolver. Do note that when you're playing the multiplayer modes like Gunfighter and Mexican Standoff, the gun spawns on the right and you shoot the gun right-handed, whereas in the shooting gallery it spawns on the left. Now the most important part of the Revolver is the cylinder release. You can see there's a slightly serrated button just below my left thumb. If you move your hand over it, you can pop that and the cylinder ejects, and that's very important because that is how you load the weapon. Now the most important part of loading the weapon is alignment. You must ensure that the bullets align as close as possible with the direction of the cylinder. Now the way that is shown by the developer, which is the easiest way to learn, is to align the weapon so that you have an easier time getting the bullet into the chamber. Now, to pick up a bullet, what you should do is to raise the hand above the table. If it's too low, your fingers go through the table and it won't actually pick up the bullet. You have to give yourself some distance, and you actually eye where the fingers pinch together, and that is your aim point. I recommend you aim for the rim of the cartridge, not the top, because you need to give yourself space to slide the bullet into the chamber. So we're going to aim it about there, take some trial and error. And I personally prefer having the index finger curled and you only use the thumb to pick up. And it takes a bit of practice, but you'll get it right eventually. So a bit lower, and there we go. We have the bullet in our fingers. Now what I want to do is to put it inside that chamber. Now this is actually a pretty close alignment. We'll switch hands just momentarily and we'll bring the weapon a little closer to us. Now if there is a slight difference in angle, we can move the weapon, but what you see is that if we get a good match with the angle, it slides in. Now what you want to do is get at least a third of the way in, and the bullet will lock itself in. If you get it all the way in, even better, but at least 1/3. If you let go, that will happen. Now that will hang off the chamber, of course. Now what you then do is you angle your thumb and you push with your thumb forward. You want to keep the thumb at the base of the cartridge and then you gently push forward and it stays in your chamber. Now, do note it doesn't lock in the chamber. If you move the weapon in the wrong direction, it will fall out, which is very frustrating, but that's how you load the weapon. You can load multiple rounds, by the way. I mean, most of you are probably happy shooting one round after throwing your mouse at the screen, but we can load multiple. So just to demonstrate again, we'll pick a second cartridge. So we'll try and get this one here, and then we'll pinch it. Again, just try and aim first. We have it there, good. Now you can see this one is slightly angled. I can still get it in, but it's going to be a little harder. So what I recommend, if you're learning this for the first time, you actually angle your gun a bit differently. It's actually much easier to turn your gun than to turn the cartridge. Again, it's not impossible, but it's much easier to do it this way. Again, for beginners, that's what you want, right? So we'll slide it in as close as possible. There we go. A bit of wriggle room. We'll get it in. perfect. And that was a perfect alignment that nearly went all the way in. That's as good as it gets. Again, thumb the rest of the way in. And there you go. You can load 3 rounds on one side, maybe 4. The bottom chamber is partly blocked by the loading gate, but you can load 2 or 3 if you want to, and you have more ammunition to spare. And the next part is I'm going to turn the gun slightly because I actually want to use this my left hand to shoot. Now be careful, you don't want to knock the cartridges out. I'll explain what we're doing next. So I'm going to grip it gently just a bit. And the reason I want to do this, I want to make sure that the trigger is correct. Sometimes when you grip it, you don't actually grip the trigger, and you might accidentally shoot a round. So I want to make sure my hand is correct position. And again, it takes a bit of practice to do. You don't have to do it right now, but I'm going to make sure I get it right here. So turn the weapon so your hand is correctly positioned over that. And we'll try and get a good grip on the trigger. It takes a bit of aim. Get it right. There we go. So what I want to do is now close the... keep the gun still first, otherwise the rounds will fall out. As you can see, if they do, just give your thumb and push it back forward. Okay. Now what I want to do now is to close the cylinder. Now the way that you're meant to do it, or just the easiest way, is to basically get your hand, the gun still of course, get your spare hand and basically slam it shut. You can use the wrist, or you can use the mouse wheel to basically lock it in place. And there you have a loaded revolver. Of course you can lift up the shoot. If you're using the shooting gallery, you lift it up and point at the target. By the way, you can bring the target closer to you. So if you push it out one way, it actually moves it further back. And if you pull it the other way, this way, it will move it closer to you. And you want it as close as possible for maximum points, of course, unless you're going for real skill shots. Now, of course, to shoot the weapon, you need to use your index finger. That's the F button by default because that's what you've aligned before. I just can't see the target, but you can imagine what we're doing here. There's no real way to aim the weapon. There are iron sights, but getting it on target is really hard. The best you can do is estimate. So let's say around there, center of mass, and we've completely missed. that's the part of the game really. But we do have a second round loaded. Let's go for one more shot, and hopefully we get a hit here, and a little off. And we just hit the side of the target there. But as you can see, we've managed to load the gun. We shot 2 bullets. Aim was terrible, but it's a completely different tutorial. This may be the easiest way to load the gun for beginners, but it's also not very fast, mostly because you have to align the gun perfectly. When you see people play on Mexican Standoff, they can load the gun very quickly. So we're going to show you some more advanced ways to load the revolver. Again, do remember that in Mexican Standoff, you have the gun on the right side, so it's slightly different, but I'll show you the principle using the left-handed setup. And the first thing I find very important is make sure you have a good trigger finger. Because this can be very tricky, I want to do it first, otherwise your whole reload is wasted. So you pull the trigger, you get it perfectly right, and I like to do several pulls to make sure it wasn't accidental. So now that we have the trigger, we'll leave that in place. So the gun will slide a bit, that's quite normal, we'll ignore that for now. We'll pick up our cartridge. Now, unlike the other version where you can align the gun, you can't align the gun using the fast method. You basically want the cartridge as close to perfect as possible. Alright, a slightly off is okay, but you want it as close as possible. Again, you're going to aim that rim, takes a bit of practice. Right there, and not quite. Oh, we're getting a little nasty here. There we go, we got it. Our next attempt. Now you can see the angle is somewhat off. That's acceptable. The closer I get, the better. I'm going to pop the cylinder open using my loading hand. So I'm trying to keep the gun as still as possible. Then grab my loading hand and tap the release with my knuckle like that. So while this isn't a perfect alignment, this should be close enough. And I'll point out that, again, with practice, you can get it exactly right. You can see some of the Korean speedrunners do a very similar thing. They practice it so it's perfect, it goes in, and then you thumb the rest of the way. It doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you get at least a third of the way in, you get that bite. The other thing that you see speed loaders do really well is snapping the cylinder in place. As I previously showed you, the proper way of doing this is to close it using your opposite hand. This can be tricky because sometimes the gun will bounce and requires a bit more extra motion to close the cylinder. What the speed loaders do is to snap into place using the gun hand. What you do is you choose your gun hand and then you snap your mouse leftwards. So you move a very quick motion that way. That automatically closes the cylinder. This does take some practice, but you don't need any extra motion. So again, you might want to practice this in the single player shooting gallery, pop the cylinder open, and then quick movement to the left. And that will always close the cylinder. Now, if you do this with a wrong motion, or you swing it around, or you hold the right mouse button, you might find that the cartridge will jump out of the cylinder, which is really bad, but the motion is simply like that. That means that if you load the weapon, you have it loaded, snap it, point it at the next person in your standoff or your game, and then fire, and you should get an instant kill at some point. Let's actually see this in action in a real Mexican standoff. Now, this is a one-on-one. The first thing we do is to put our finger on the trigger of the revolver, and we have it in our right hand. We knock down a couple of cartridges to make sure we have a good alignment, and we try and pinch it as accurately as possible. It takes me around 4 attempts, and as I said, practice makes perfect, both for the trigger finger and the cartridge. We bring the gun to the left side and bring it closer to our loading hand. We lift our loading hand so it goes above the cylinder, and we tap the release with our knuckle. There we go. We slide the cartridge in. The alignment is nearly perfect, but the elevation is slightly off. The cartridge does fall out, but the tip is still just in the chamber. That's enough for me. Like I said, it's a bit hard to do this, but with practice you can work with mistakes like this. We snap the cylinder shut, and then we point the gun at our opponent. We take a couple of squeezes to rotate the cylinder, and our third shot is the kill shot. Let's do one more, this time with a 4-player Mexican standoff. So here we go, we'll grab our gun on the second attempt, which is again good timing. We knock down the first cartridge, and that way we have the right alignment, and you can see the other players are barely able to grab their guns. So we are delicately pinching our cartridge a bit more forward. We'll go down, there we go. That's not that bad, we grabbed a little high up, but we go through the same motions. We lift our gun to the left, we raise our hand, we tap the release, and it opens up like that. Perfect so far. We slide it in, and I make a slight mistake here. That looks good, but I accidentally knock my gun, and what happens is the cartridge will actually start to fall off. So it falls down, but remember there is one more chamber right on the edge. It is partially blocked by the loading gate, but you can actually move the cartridge around it and still squeeze it in. The room will catch on, so you have to be a little clever in the way you angle that cartridge. But I don't want to waste time trying to pick another one up. I'm going to salvage this one and try to make it work. It is do or die. Once I see the cartridge is past that barrier, and it's not there yet, you got to get it past there. This is not ideal, but it's going to work. Again, either you get it right and you win, or you get it wrong and you die. And you can see we just make it past. We snap the cylinder close. We point the gun at the person who's making the most progress. The guy on the right has no gun. He's okay. It's the guy in the middle who has a gun. He's struggling a lot. We squeeze a couple of rounds, and the next shot will be live. And right in the chest there, he goes down. So we then begin our next reload phase. Of course, when you're playing one-on-one, you need to kill one person. With 4 people, you need to kill all of them to win. And in many cases, you might be the only one who is able to load the gun, so players will rage quit or reset the game, which isn't uncommon. So we'll grab this cartridge. You can see the guy on the right is trying to stop us from loading. But we'll move our gun to the left to avoid his hands. We load the gun, we tap the release of our loading hand, tap, and then we start inserting the next round. That goes in fairly well. And unfortunately, again, we slightly go off. We try and thumb it in place. Oh, that's terrible. But we salvage it by going to the bottom chamber again. That's actually worked quite nicely this time. It's twice in a row. You can see it gets stuck. The rim gets stuck on the cylinder. But if we get it in, we don't quite get it in. And you see we try to snap it shut, but it is stopping us from closing it. We do get it in. We snap it shut. And we point the weapon towards the only other person with a gun. He's not even holding the right direction. We point towards him, and this next shot should be the kill shot. No, next one. But he resets the game. And I don't know, I feel this is a sore loser thing. People, I know you're gonna lose, but you know, taking that kill away from them, that is a little cheap. But alright, we respawn, and it's not going to be any better, I swear. So we have the perfect trigger finger, we have a perfect grab on the cartridge. This is an even better match. If you rage quit or rage reset because I was going to win, this is going to be even worse for him. So a lot of players will leave the game when they see you doing this. This is actually one way to win really easily. You can almost bluff this. But if you look like you know what you're doing and they see you've got a cartridge partially in the cylinder, they know they've lost. So this isn't perfect. But again, we carefully thumb the cartridge into the chamber. If this was a perfect alignment, I'd get it in first shot, but you can still salvage this. Just push gently. You don't want to shove it in. You want to make sure that the thumb is on the base of the cartridge all the way through, and we actually get it in. We want to make sure it's all the way in. One guy's already rage quit because he's seen that we're loading. We actually throw half our cartridge on the ground, which is really bad for us. Now this guy has a gun. It's not loaded, but he's holding it. That's enough of a threat for me, so I'm going to aim straight towards his chest, and we go right through the rib cage. The last guy, he was the guy who reset before, I think he's the host. We grab another cartridge, we have enough cartridges on the table, and we'll try to do another load. And see if we carefully maneuver that cartridge to the right position. It's not perfect, but again, it's good enough. And he leaves the game. Like I said, when you know what you're doing, people won't stick around to play, and we win, but we load one more round just to be sure. You can see that's a good finish. This is New Sensei, thank you for watching, hope this is helpful, and maybe I'll see you next time.